Hi, it is Beth Brodowski from Iris Creative, and I am back again to talk a little bit more about how design is your friend when it comes to your fundraising. If this is your first video that you're watching, you're going to want to go back and take a look at the first video that I created because we're talking about design from the perspective of the fact that design serves to create an impression and provide access. And when you have those two things together, they serve to help support your ability to build trust and value for your organization. In the previous video that I did, I talked all about how design helps build an impression and why that's important for your organization. So go back and check that one out. And today we're going to talk about the other half of the equation, how design helps facilitate access. So one of the things that I said in the previous video is that design is about helping your consumer, your donor, access the information that they need, get what they want. It is not about decorating a surface. A lot of times people look at design and respond to it based on whether they like it or whether they think it's pretty or something like that. In business, that's not the purpose of design, and this is business, right? We're trying to create an action. We're trying to get somebody to do something. And to do that, we need for them to be able to look at what we present to them, process that information, and very quickly move from, I know what this is about, I care about what this is about, to I'm ready to take action and do what they're asking me to do. And so design can support your copywriting in the ability to help make that transactional behavior happen. So today I'm going to give you 5 tips, 5 ways that you can use design to help create a better ability for people to access your information, understand it, and move quickly to taking action on your ask. So the first one, and literally if you did nothing else other than this one, this is one of the most important things. Number 1 tip, space is important. It's critically important. It's so easy for us to think, let's fill the whole sheet of paper, or let's fill the whole graphic area if it's an on-screen type of a thing that you're doing. We have all this space, and things especially like a social media post or even an email, you've got all the length in the world that you can work with. So there isn't necessarily the restriction of space that you might find on an 8.5 by 11 sheet of paper. Nevertheless, resist the urge to fill every inch of space that's available with words and content. If you think about something like music, when you listen to music, it's the pauses between the notes of music that let you take a breath, absorb it, hear the distinctive qualities between each phrase of the music. Visual things are exactly the same of that. You need the quiet spaces. We would call that negative space in design. You need the spaces of non-design or non-content are just as important to the spaces of content so that people can pace what they're reading and actually absorb what you say. So resist the temptation to not edit your copy or resist your boss's desire to have you not edit the copy and do things like cheat, we call it cheat the margins, go too close to the edge of the paper or the edge of the post and steal space from the outside in order to cram more text in there. Another thing that people do is they make their lines of type too close together, tight type, and no space between their paragraph to get more content onto the paper. Another trick is we make the font smaller, right? That's when you start to make the font smaller, you can fit more words on the page. But the average donor is in their 60s, and at about the age of 40, our eyes start getting not as good. The font size that you want for readability for a 60-year-old, they always claim to be 14. Personally, I have to say, we never set anything that big. That's really a big font. We typically choose 12 or 13 point font when we're setting things for most people, but especially for people over the age of 40. So you want an amount of type that can fit on whatever space you're using, whether it's your email or your social media post or your letter, that can fit in your space at 12 to 13 point type, or maybe even 14 if you really like that big size font or you have really old donors, with plenty of space between the lines of type and plenty of space between the paragraphs of type and plenty of space around the edges of the type. Spacing, spacing, spacing is so, so important. Honestly, putting more copy in and tightening it up to do that will not actually help people be able to read your content. So that's tip number one. Tip number two, short paragraphs. One of the things about, specifically about a fundraising letter, and often even about emails, is they go the entire width of a screen or of a page. As somebody's eyes go along the page, you get drop off. So the longer the line of copy is, the harder it is for somebody's eyes to go all the way across the page and read it. So when your fonts are too small and when your paragraphs are too dense, it just looks like a big gray block, and people don't tend to want to read that. So if your paragraphs are short, 1 to 2 sentences, which is not how you would have been taught in high school to write paragraphs, but it's very different. Fundraising writing is a very specific style of writing that has a visual component too. So short, 1 to 2 sentences, and you want your sentences to be short. Short sentences, short paragraphs. So, so those are the first two tips. Tip number three, the use of bold. So in a fundraising letter, if you look at other fundraising letters that you see, you'll probably see the use of whole sentences or sometimes like an entire line written in bold. So the way to use that is if you think about your fundraising letter and if somebody picked it up and scanned it and all they read were the bold highlighted paragraphs, the bold highlighted text, would they be able to get the gist of what you're talking about and what you're asking for? So when you're choosing what to make bold, think about it like an outline. Think about it as if they only read these bold lines, would they understand our message? Because to be honest, standing over the trash can, reading your letter, scanning on their computer, reading their email, ready to delete, that may be all they read. So you want to think about it. Scan the letter down, bold paragraphs. And by bold, I mean some stylistic difference. I tend to like bold because it's very visually different from the main content, but I also think it's important that you use restraint. You don't need something to be bold and italic and underline and red to make it stand out. Design is about making really good choices. It's about choosing what one or maybe two things you're going to do to make something stand out and be different. And because your main body text is going to be plain, probably black text, even one thing, even just making it bold, will make it stand out. I promise you. You don't have to layer on every single design technique that there is to make it stand out. And it's really better if you don't. The fourth tip, number four, that I'm going to give you is the way people read, is to understand how people's eyes and their reading habits work. People read in the shape of a Z. So let's see if I'm going to try and do this opposite because I think that'll make it show right. They read across the first line, and then they read diagonally down across the page, and then they read across the bottom of the page. Hopefully you can see my finger as I do that. So they're making a Z. And if that's backwards, I apologize. I'm not really sure if this works like a mirror or not. So when you think about that, what that means is they're going to read their name, the salutation. They'll probably read your first line of text, maybe your first sentence. Then they're going to scan through the entire middle of the letter, most likely. And then they're going to hit the bottom of the first page, the bottom of the email, the bottom of your social media post, whatever it is, and they're going to read that. And so typically that's the spot where you might put a PS, which is why I'm sure a lot of the other fundraising consultants are going to talk to you about that. But a PS is so important because sometimes your first sentence and your PS, that's all they're going to read. So, the way we like to do PSs is we like to do a PS that reinforces the ask that's in the letter as opposed to but wait, there's more PS. A lot of times when it's PS, you'll have written a whole concise letter on a, it's a great story, it's a wonderful ask, it's super tight, and then people want to throw in a PS that says things like, but you can join us on Facebook, or you can also, be a major donor, or don't forget our matching gift program, or to ask your employer, or something else that's totally different. From a design perspective, we know that people may only read your first sentence and your PS. So if you use your PS to reinforce, to deepen, to basically sum up your ask that's in your letter, if then when they go back and read your letter, they hear more about your story because it enticed them, it builds on that rather than distracting them from it. The way any type of marketing tool that's about getting someone to take action works best is if you treat it like a funnel. You start out with a big story, and then you narrow, your focus till you give them one specific thing you're asking them to do. And you want to do that from a perspective of visual cues, from a perspective of wording cues. For example, if you're in doing this in email, a way that you can use design is to center your text and have your text literally take the shape of a funnel till it points at the very bottom to a button that says click here to donate. That funnel, that V shape, gives people a cue, and it helps their eye move down to take the action that they want. So last tip I'm going to give you, number 5, the last tip for the day, is about color. So color is a really important cue for people. Color says, look here, pay attention, do this. If you just do a black and white letter, that's totally fine. It can absolutely work. But if you happen to be using color, whether you're going to use a black letter and your one color logo, or if you're printing something in full color, if you're using a photo or something like that, you want to think about using color strategically. You don't want to, like spray it all over your sheet, spray it all over your things. You want to think about color as an anchor to focus people's attention where you need it. That's why headlines are often in color. That's why buttons are often in color. And when you do things and only use color strategically to really point people's attention to the places that you want it to go, that way color can be like an assist. It's sort of like, giving the assist to the goal, that gets people and moves them through your letter so that they can get to the place that you need them to get to. So those are the 5 tips. Use space, short paragraphs, highlight things with bold, but not everything. Think about the Z shape of reading and what to do with your PS. And last, use color as a guide to move people carefully and strategically to anchor points where you want them to pay attention. So that's my goal. That's my talk about access today. I hope those cues are helpful for you as you begin the design of your materials. Take care, and we'll see you in the next time.